Remember, when you open my book, the quote is from Maya Angelou, every storm runs out of rain. These storms we have outside, they can be a thunderstorm with hail. On the other side, the sun is shining. It's the same for the storms in our life. The storm will run out of rain. What I notice about the storms outside is they leave the ground wet and fertile for planting. The storms in our lives can do the exact same thing. What I'm interested in asking people is, what are you going to plant?
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Tom LeNoble, who's been told 3 separate times he has 6 months to live.
Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com.
Tom grew up in a one-room house with no hot water. And at 5 years old, he decided he wanted his life to look differently. And it did. He went on to have executive roles at MCI, Walmart, Palm, and then he interviewed with and was hired by Zuckerberg at Facebook early in their days. But none of that is the interesting part that we're going to talk about today. All the lesson learned and how he survived multiple times with that can-do attitude. Let's meet Tom and hear how he did it. Welcome to Richer Soul, Tom LeNoble. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, it's great to be with you and your viewers. I've been looking forward to this.
And I'm excited for the conversation as well. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Wow, that's a great question for me. This book behind me, you'll learn quickly that I grew up in a shack. We actually called it the shack. It was a one-bedroom shell of a house. We didn't have hot water. We didn't have a refrigerator. My dad actually brought home ice for the ice box and heated water on these kerosene stoves that I can smell right now. There was even a pecking order to Bass, and being the baby, I was last, except on my birthday, I was first. And while both parents lived through the Depression, so the attitude about money was that the rug was going to be pulled out from under you at any moment. And one of my favorite examples is a handle on one of the windows broke, and I went with my dad to the hardware store, and he bought 3 of them. And I remember saying, "Dad, why are you buying 3? We only need 1. And his answer was, "You might need it someday." And that was a theme of tucking things away because you might need them someday and the rug would be pulled out from under you. So in my world, it was a very humble world, lots of love, but not a lot of money, but certainly one that was tainted by parents that lived through the Depression.
How did that affect your views on money?
You know, it was interesting. Until I was about 5, when I started school, I didn't know the difference, right? I thought our little shack on the dirt road was normal. And my wonderful parents, we had a lot of love. They were very giving and helping others even when they didn't have much, but I didn't much know the difference. But when I started school at a young age of 5, I remember a few weeks in, I came home and looked around the shack and thought to myself, this isn't like other people. this experience in my little 5-year-old mind, probably different words. I also remember thinking that this is not what's going to happen to me. There's more for me in some way.
And so you knew that at 5.
I knew there was going to be something different. Remember, I had a little 5-year-old mind, so I'm speaking it from my adult voice today, but I knew there was something about it that wasn't going to be what my experience would be. I knew that I was not going to live that way.
Well, no, the reason I ask that is that sometimes people are come through a situation and it just locks them in and they assume that that is the way they're going to be for the rest of their life. And then along come other people like yourself who go, not for me. And even at a very young age, say, I'm going to do things differently. And it kind of creates, I don't know if it's grit, determination, or some sort of a path forward for you.
Well, I know one thing about me that's always been true. There's two things, actually. One is I have a very, very high level of curiosity. And while it's gotten me in trouble a few times in my life, I've always been very curious. The other thing, whether it be back then in the shack or with some major health issues I've had, or even positions I've held, when someone says to me something is impossible or it can't be done, there's this little voice that crawls up in my ear and comes out my mouth when it says, watch this.
Do you consider yourself the rebel?
I today, when I look back on it, I was very much a rebel. I don't think I knew it at the time. It's funny that you asked that because I remember the first time as a kid that I went to see my father's parents, my grandparents, when I walked in the house and started moving around, my grandfather screamed, "There's a varmint in the house," which became my nickname for quite a while.
Was that in a loving way or just because of what you did?
It was very much in a loving way. I'm not sure that it was the nickname I wanted, but that was what happened. And I was varmint for a long, long time, and it was very endearing.
There's quotes throughout your book that I want to ask you about. They kind of are in between the chapters. And I think this one applies right here. You said everyone comes into this world carrying the baggage of those who came before them. You can choose to drag it with you for all of eternity, or you can drop it and keep growing. That sounds to me like that's exactly what you did with your money story.
I think it really was, and other things that I'll share with you. But I think those of us that seem to have experiences, we end up modeling them or thinking they have to be our experience. I remember when I went to my first high school reunion, 80% of the people never left this little small town. In fact, some of them lived 20 blocks from each other, and the city wasn't that big and hadn't seen each other in 20 years. So those of us that had moved away, we were almost like little celebrities. But bring it in today's world with clients that I work with, I am amazed at how many people live in the past as if there's a do-over, as if we're like the videos we watch on our phone now and there's a go back 10 seconds button. That's not how life is. We don't get to live in the past. In fact, when we do, we miss out what's happening right here in the present.
That reminds me of something I've noticed and I never totally understood before, but now I kind of get it. There's a lot of guys who maybe are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, still hanging out at the high school football field. And they never left. And I'm like, it's time to grow up.
Yeah, I think if you have a kid that's in high school and you're hanging out there or a grandkid, there's a reason for that. But sometimes people are still trying to live life that they didn't get something fulfilled and they think that that's going to fulfill them. I know for me, I start when someone asks me to describe what I do, the first thing I say is, I retired being retired to be inspired. I tried in for retirement and it was not for me. I had a great time traveling the world and doing some things, but I knew I had more to give. And I'm not at all in the mode of getting the lawn chair and sitting in the backyard and having a low key life. I'm going to be 72 this year and I couldn't be more engaged. In fact, I think I'm working harder than I ever have. And if you look at the companies I was executives at, I was working hard.
I think I'm following in your path. I learned maybe 7, 8 years, 10 years ago that retirement wasn't the answer. It was doing what you loved and have fun doing it and get rid of everything else. And I'll be working hard when I hit your age and well beyond it. People are like, "You're going to retire?" I'm like, "Yeah, when I die."
Yeah, yeah. There's a great statistic that's interesting for people to know about if they don't, which is the one common thing that indicates a long life is engagement. Number one.
And I think that's big. I think one of the issues in the United States, and tell me if you've seen it or experienced it, we don't respect our elders and their wisdom.
I think that's true in many cases where we elders own some of that too. So there's two sides of this. One is, I think, in our culture, we don't honor and respect older people like in some other cultures and the wisdom. I think the other thing that I've had the good fortune of working with many generations. I've worked with my own Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, even a few alphas along the way. And what I have learned is that those informative years in our early 20s, older people tend to say, this is how you should do it, or we get labels. You're like, I remember the millennials when I was at Facebook, when I was old enough to be everybody's father. We would say they were lazy, they didn't wear good clothes, they all have tattoos. Well, they actually were extraordinarily smart. But what I've learned is that rather than be judgmental, we really should think more about being mentors and how we share information. But most importantly, I think that what's going on are the societal shifts we're going to see in the coming years. And paying attention and being part of that process, you just might learn something.
Let's take a little detour. What makes you think there are societal shifts coming, and what's kind of the theory or the idea behind that?
Yeah, well, I'll give you one. You and I were talking a little earlier about service and answering phones. Well, in my early days of leading customer service organizations, some powerhouses, we had huge customer service centers with call centers, we even called them. So fast forward, you get into the days of .com, Facebook, and that era, and people are then doing it by email and text because it saves a lot of money. And then today we're moving into the AI phase. Well, those things are happening. Those are bubbling up during those formative years of what's going on while people are using technology differently. And they are the ones that become leaders that do the change. I can remember in my years, I'm one of those people that was responsible for helping develop voice response units, those horrible things that say press 1, 2, 3, 4 to some companies 50, and misuse and abuse of them from what they were originally designed for. Well, fast forward today, and we're looking at new technologies that there's no such thing. It even recognizes your voice, and you don't even know if you're talking to a real person. These are things that are going to evolve, and a lot of those things happen when people are young as they're using it and finding new ways. And some of us that are older tend to judge it instead of maybe trying to understand it, embrace it, and learn into it. Think about what happened when the internet launched. The internet launched and it took many years because some people said, I'll never do it. Well, many of those people that never did it and said that either did eventually do it or they were left behind. And I think that's a perfect example of what will again happen with AI. AI is not going anywhere. Will we be through some rocky periods with it? You bet we will. And it will still survive. And I have some predictions of how that will turn out. But that's my own personal ones. But these things that are formative, they don't just go away because we don't like them or we liked what we were using before.
As I look back through history, and it's kind of even going back through your book, you think about it, hot water wasn't the norm, AC wasn't the norm. Wasn't till what, 50s, 60s that a refrigerator was the norm. There was still the milkman, the iceman, and all those things. And it's not that long ago. And we tend to forget that the amount of change that has occurred in the world is pretty massive. It didn't happen as fast as it's happening now. Now we're at, record speeds of change. AI has definitely brought about fast adaptation, and yet not everyone is taking full advantage of it. And I think the people who are going to separate themselves so much faster.
They really always have. We used to call them early adopters, but I think when you think about the way technology has evolved, technology builds on technology. I was there, believe it or not, when the first fax happened. It went from DC to Atlanta, and I remember we all stood back and looked at it and thought it was magic. Many people don't even know what a fax machine is today. And then we all thought we were going to lose our jobs. I was there when we took paper off desks and put computers. Everybody fought it. They just knew they were going to lose their job. And then email came along. We thought we were going to lose our job. Now we just like to get rid of email. The internet came along and people put their head in the sand. And now if you don't have the internet, you are dead in the water. And that's going to continue long past AI. But I think what you're speaking to, which is so accurate, is the technology builds upon itself, which allows it to be faster and faster as it goes on, because that's one of the requirements people have is, how do I do this faster? It's an interesting thing to watch have happen. And we're going to see the same thing, I believe, now. There'll be people, I'm not using AI, it's going to kill us, it's Bob, all these situations. But if you're not using it at some level, you will eventually be left behind.
Unless you work for the IRS, where you must fax your paperwork still today. That's why we have a fax machine, because we have to deal with the IRS.
Yes, someday that will change, just not today.
There are always laggards in the world. And so that's going to happen. We had talked about that quote as it applied to money, but it sounded like it also hit some other areas in your life.
The quote
The baggage quote.
Oh, I think it is throughout life. In fact, I use it in my business a lot with people. As I said, people living in the past. I work with people that have lost their job, and we have a hard time when that happens, making it about what the reality was. We don't like it, but the company made a decision, and people tend to think they were done wrong. And once you help them see that that wasn't, in fact, most people were treated very fairly, not only based on the law, but based on how the company was when they were leaving. And then what happens is people start turning it on themselves. There must be something wrong with me, right? None of these things, if you think about it, are going to move you forward. So I think that's one thing in life. Things happen all the time. In fact, in my book, you'll read, I call them terrible gifts. What's a terrible gift? We all lose somebody we love. A pet dies, a relationship ends, we get sick, a disaster strikes. These things happen. We wouldn't wish them on anyone. However, I think if you're open to it, whether it's a year, 5 years, 10 years, a gift comes along from it. We think when we lose our job, it's the end of the world. We don't know, because it's not here yet, that something better may be coming or some transformation may be coming. This applies in so many places where we carry around the proverbial ball and chain, holding ourselves back from embracing something that's coming to us because we're too focused on what happened.
Which leads me into the next quote, which I think you kind of hit. There will be times when you hit an absurd number of challenges, one after another. They come in waves, don't they? Focus on the knowledge that you will be rewarded with valuable lessons on the other side of the storm. Now, I got to tell you something. When these things happen, I'm not thinking about valuable lessons on the other side of the storm. How do you have that mindset shift to actually say, okay, I'm coming through a storm?
Yes. Well, one thing I'll say about that is it's life being life. When someone says to me, everything is perfect in my life, you know what this looks like to me? It looks like that flat line we saw on the hospital TV shows. Life isn't like that. Life is a series. We can call them ups and downs. And I happen to believe what we perceive as downs is where we have our opportunity to learn and grow and use resilience. And those up times express what we learn and expand. But if we're smart, knowing what life does, we realize that likely there'll be another time that we get an opportunity to learn and grow. That is just what happens in life. I've been given 6 months to live 3 times. I've had 2 life-threatening illnesses. The first I was told was terminal. I've lived with metastatic cancer the last 14 years. And as you can see, I'm very much still here. And one thing I've learned along the journey is not only about living in the past, but how long we wallow in what happened to us. I'm not saying don't take time to have your feelings, don't take times to experience, but the longer you spend there, the less time you will find in moving forward. And many people just choose to be there. I don't judge them. It's how they approach life. But if you really want to have something shift in these times of life, when the storm passes, you keep moving. Remember when you open my book, the quote is from Maya Angelou: every storm runs out of rain. These storms we have outside, they can be a thunderstorm with hail. On the other side, the sun is shining. It's the same for the storms in our life. The storm will run out of rain. What I notice about the storms outside is they leave the ground wet and fertile for planting. The storms in our lives can do the exact same thing. What I'm interested in asking people is, what are you going to plant?
Do people know the answer to that question?
No, but it's certainly worth exploring. I think that's where a good coach, sometimes a therapist, depending on what you're dealing with, sometimes just the support of others, but something more than staying stagnant in it and not exploring and seeing what might be available to you. There's lots of unknowns in life. Staying in the unknown can be very fearful and scary.
It can. I'm learning to become comfortable being uncomfortable. This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
I think it's interesting because people talk about fear and even the imposter syndrome. We have so many books about it and people talk about it. What I've learned is that these things that for some people stop them in their tracks, or they think they don't belong in a situation. What I've learned is they're just simply opportunities for growth. We're in an experience that we've not had before, and there are opportunities for us to learn something about it and explore something new. Think of how many things in your life you have learned about that once you first had them happen to you, you were fearful of them. And then once you go through them, the other thing I find with people is they forget what I call evidence. Something happens in their life and it's big and they're really challenged. They forget about the things in their life that they accomplished. So, tip back into those things that you were able to overcome. And if nothing else, it kind of bolsters you a little bit to what your challenge is, knowing that you were able to overcome challenges in the past.
And that's a big part of it. I want to go back to the 2 life-threatening illnesses. What is different about you, or what is different about the way you approach them that you were able to survive where other people might have folded?
Yeah. There's a couple things I'll say about that really good question. There's one thing. First of all, I've had access to the best medical care and treatments, and my skin color gives me privilege. But one of the things that is true about the whole thing is I believed I could be here. So that is true about it. I think the other thing that happened for me is that I can remember the first time I was given the 6 months to live and I got a diagnosis. I remember I walked to my car and I looked in the rearview mirror and I spoke to that illness and I said, if you want to come join my party, welcome. If you think you're going to take me out, you're in the fight of your life. And I think once you've dealt with the idea of dying, for me, I was more interested in what I was doing while I was living than the fact that I was dying. I also think there's something for people to think about, that when we plant seeds in the future, something we're looking forward to, something we're going to do for enjoyment, or we're going to accomplish, or a risk we're going to take, there's something being drawn to it energetically. And the other thing I've learned that's so important is, if you can keep yourself alive, something new is coming along.
And in today's world, that's happening faster and faster than ever on the medical side. And I don't think enough people know about that. The current thinking is, if you can stay alive for the next 5 to 10 years, the amount of change that's going to happen in the medical space is dramatic,
Yeah.
as far as what's going to happen.
I'll give you an example. My cancer is prostate cancer, which metastasized in my bones. Back in 2012, when I was diagnosed, the options for treatment were minimal. You had really one or two choices. Today, I just attended a symposium, and the latest treatment, not only do you have a smorgasbord of options, you have a smorgasbord of treatments. That's how much changed in that period of time. So things are happening and things are changing. And I'm not belittling illness. I'm not belittling that some people are challenged by it and can't do what I'm speaking to. I'm just offering it as a bit of inspiration, that looking forward and trying to stay engaged and trying to look to the future is a possibility. And if nothing else, Rocky, it feels better.
That it does. And it's funny because you talk about death, and it's the one thing we all will face. And I think it's the one thing that very few people plan for or come to grips with. And when you do, you get to live because
Yes,
you're
I'll tell
okay.
you, Rocky, great topic. I actually created a keynote talk and a workshop about it. It's called Living Fully While Dying. And it comes in 3 phases that I present. One is phase 1 for me. I was living fully without regard to dying. Phase 2, I was still living fully while I was being told I was dying. Phase 3, living fully, realizing I was dying all along. It's not a heavy talk. It's not a heavy workshop. It's helping people get in touch with the moment you were born. The one guarantee is that you were going to die. Some of us get longer, some of us get shorter. Fortunately, we don't know. But what I'm interested in is, what's the call you need to make? What's the risk you need to take? What are you doing with this body? Because whatever you believe the great mystery is, and we have lots of beliefs and faith in things, one thing is true: the life in this physical body is finite. What are you going to do with it?
Live fully out, right? That's the choice you have to make. We all get to make it for ourselves
We
and
all
how
get
we
to
want
make
to
that
do that.
choice.
That's correct. And you say that. Never be afraid to acknowledge you want more out of life. Get off your pillow and keep growing. There's always something to contribute. And that goes back to your age and the fact that you're still doing things. And I'm always looking at people 20 years older than me going, what did they do during these 20 years that they're still going? Because I want to do that too.
Yeah, I chuckled. When I worked at Facebook, I was old enough to be everyone's father. Everybody was in their 20s, and now they're in their 40s, and I see them posting about they're in midlife crisis and their life is over. And it makes me chuckle, because in many cases, your life has just begun, of what's possible and what you can do with life. There's countless examples of that. And I think the thing is get on with it, whatever you're going to do is. And then people forget that they don't get to change their mind. You don't have to do what you studied or what you thought the roadmap was. My favorite story, I was sitting around with some people after work back when I worked at MCI, and we were having beers after work talking about what we studied. And we went around the room. We got to this woman at the end, and she ran marketing, and won all these awards in and out of the company. And so we all looked at her and said, Kim, MBA in marketing, you're a marketing wizard. And she got this smile and she chuckled and looked at us and said, I've never taken a marketing course in my life. I'm a concert pianist. So I think we get fixed in the idea that either what we studied or what we said we were going to be are the bigger one, what we told people, like our parents, what we were going to be, that we're fixed to it for life, when that's not so true. I get to work with people who are ending their career, but not ending their work. And it's so much fun to ask them, what was it you always wanted to do and didn't? They become little kids.
And I think that's a big part of it. And that's what I was going to ask you, because I think sometime in your 40s, you start to ask the question, is this all there is? You start to realize you might have climbed the wrong mountain, and it's time to find the mountain that you really want to climb and do it on your terms. And I'm assuming that if they're still at Facebook in their 40s, money is not a problem anymore, right? You got rich, now what? Which is kind of the tagline of the show. You get choices now. There's no more excuses for you living the life you're living. Go figure it out.
Yeah, I think 40s is an interesting thing. In fact, I do things with people. I offer them when they hit 40 to have a talk with me, and I tell them what I think the 40s are about. And one thing that I share is the 40s is when we get in touch with reality of who we are. So that's one thing that is interesting about the 40s. I think what you're speaking to is, what are we doing in our lives? And it doesn't mean that you have to have money. It's at some point in your life experiencing what I call being of service to others and giving back. My life turned out that I'm a philanthropist today. I give to underserved communities, youth in the arts, first-gen students, current women's issues of the day, things that I'm very passionate about. I did it actually anonymously for many years. And what's interesting to me is that people would come to me and say, Tom, when I have money, I want to be a philanthropist. So I started thinking about that, and I created another talk and workshop called the Philanthropic Mindset. I even have an article that's published each month. And the idea is that your smile, a hello, sitting with someone in need is a philanthropic gesture. You don't need your name on a building, attend a gala, or write a check. You can have a philanthropic mindset. The difference, Rocky, is when you have expectations of something in return, then you've stepped out of being in the philanthropic mindset.
I liken that to people who say to me, I'm going to go to the gym after I lose weight. You know, it's the same thing. You can be philanthropic at whatever level you are capable of, whether it be time or money. Both of them are great to give, and you give what you have at that moment. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, time, talent, and treasure. There's many ways that we can contribute. I work with a lot of nonprofits, and I remind them that the $1,000 check you got and the 4 quarters someone gave you are very much the same. They come from someone's wealth. They come from the same spirit of giving. And while you think $1,000 can do a lot more for you, a lot of quarters can add up fast.
Very much they can. And you never know when the person giving out quarters starts giving out thousands. And if you don't start there, you're not going to necessarily get there. You mentioned you work at Facebook. You actually interviewed directly with Zuckerberg. You were one of the early people there. What was that whole experience like?
You know, I interviewed with Mark when he was 19. And I remember getting a phone call at my desk. I was running global service operations for Palm, the Palm Pilot Trio people, and this recruiter called. Facebook was still in college, as I didn't even know what it was. I thanked them and hung up the phone. And a buddy called me that I used to work with, who was a venture capitalist in the Valley, and said, I referred you to Facebook. You didn't even talk to them. I said, what is Facebook? And you can read the story of that interview in my book, which is a great story. But I interviewed with Mark when he was 19. And, you know, I had a cushy job traveling the world with a beautiful office looking over the bay. And I took this risk. I got intrigued with the product. I got intrigued with the generation's willingness to share information. And I went to Facebook, and it was radically different. I mean, I remember getting there the first day and everybody was 20 and 21 because they had deferred law school, business school, and medical school. Facebook was in colleges. It was their dream job. And here I come along old enough to be their father. They actually called me the adult in the room.
It's funny. You mentioned you work for Palm, and I used to have a Palm. I loved it before the iPhone came out. You work for MCI. Both of these companies are gone in a sense, even though they created a technology groundbreaking in their time, and yet down the road they disappear. And I think people forget that even what is hot in the moment, just give it time, it'll change.
Yeah.
And
And there's some stories about each of those. With MCI, if we remember, Bernie Ebbers bought the company and created WorldCom and then ended up spending the rest of his life in jail because he was committing fraud. A lot of people were hurt by what he did. If you look at Walmart.com, when I was there in the early days, Walmart itself thought we were a gnat flying around bothering them because our revenues weren't even as big as one supercenter. Today, they could not live without Walmart.com, and they are one. You look at Palm, the Palm Pilot was used by so many people, and the Trio came along, was really the leading cutting edge smartphone, a little bit ahead of its time. And there was a merger there between Handspring and Palm One to create Palm. Well, Palm now is part of HP. But I think what happened there was, the iPhone sprung up and they grabbed the market share. So it took off in a different vein, but the technology of smartphones continued on. So I think this happens in business. In fact, it's a prediction I'll give you about what I think will happen with AI. If you look back when software as a service happened, there were many, many, many of them that then turned into the top ones, Salesforce, Oracle. They cannibalized and bought up everybody else, or the other ones fell away. I think in the coming years, we're going to see a similar thing with AI, where there will be some that don't make it. There will be some that will be bought out by others, and we'll end up with a few of the really big ones that are left to take it to whatever that level is when we get there.
well, if I go back to the internet, AOL, I mean, yes, they're around, but they're not what they used to be. Yahoo, which was a big player, still around, again, not what they used to be. At Home, which was the first broadband, disappeared. So yeah, these things come and go. And so I've learned that, just watch and things will change again. And that happens over time.
Well, for some people who remember it, if they remember Ask Jeeves,
Mhm.
Ask Jeeves is actually the precursor to what we call as AI today, LLMs. And so it's technology as it races forward and people come in, that's what it's all about, and create new things that are better, faster, more effective. And if you don't keep up, you're no longer here.
And that is true. One of my pet peeves is customer service, because it seems like in today's world, it's almost disappeared. And I think we're going through, you talked about it, it's a cycle. And I think the companies that do it well are the ones that are going to survive and thrive going forward. And the ones that don't are going to slowly lose clients. They're not going to say anything, they're just going to disappear. Now, if there's no competition, I get it. But that also paves the way for competition because, hey, you're not treating your people well.
There's another factor, and Rocky, you're correct. We talked about it a little earlier about this cyclic nature of looking at customer service, where it's been horrible, it gets better, and then it gets bad. And we're in one of those, what we perceive as being a downturn. And we're assigning it to talking to people. I think when I spoke to you earlier about some of the societal shifts, people in their 20s that are looking for customer service today don't want to talk to people. And that has been an evolution that started long ago. When they're our age, there won't be people you're talking to. It will be something radically different. And we're in sort of the chrysalis of a transformation, because we miss being able to talk to someone. I made some airline reservations. I had to make a lot of changes last night. One carrier I talked to, I waited forever. Took me forever to get through them. When I got through, it was somebody that really wasn't skilled enough to help me. The other one answered my call immediately and handled it with expertise. So there's so many factors involved in it. But I think this idea of talking to someone is part of an evolution that's been going on for a long time. Remember, once upon a time, we only did customer service by voice. Then email came along, then text. and then more instant things through websites. It's been an evolution, and now leading into AI and what we like to call bots and stuff. These are things, but remember, the young people that are going to eventually use them are what's going to drive what happens with them long term, because they don't want to talk to people. They often don't want to talk to each other.
Hopefully that's going to change. And I agree with you. I'm okay not talking to a person, but what I find is the problem doesn't get fixed, which is what I really want. Fix the problem. If you can do it with the least amount of friction, I'm in. Amazon actually does well. Like with Amazon, when I have a customer service problem, I usually have to chat with them and they take care of it. The majority of time, they take care of it and they take care of it quickly and well. Other companies, they don't even seem to care, which is, I think, what my problem is you get the feeling that they don't even care.
Well, what I find is a lot of it is based on the cost of doing business. So the evolution over time, which we have seen with what we used to call as there exist today help centers, which used to be called help, or FAQs, where you get the highest facts. This has all been part of an evolution. So many people want you to go solve your own problem, either in a community or by using their knowledge base, as opposed to talking to you. And while we don't like it, remember, younger people have been doing this for a while, and they're pretty much okay with doing that, as long as they have somebody to reach when it doesn't work. There are people that are very angry because you can't find Amazon customer service to talk to. You can find the number and get to them, but if you're not savvy enough to figure that out, I remember, and they've fixed this where I can't do this anymore. It used to be, because I worked in customer service for so long, that when you got in the VRU, the dreaded press 1, 2, or 3, if you just do nothing, you timed out and got someone. So my thing was, I just wait until I got somebody, and they would finally answer the phone and get me to who I wanted to talk to. Well, now they figured that out. If you pull that trick, they just tell you goodbye, try again, and they hang up the call.
It's always something. We've been talking about your one book, but you have another book that just came out, Morning Ground. Yeah. Before the day asks anything of you, take this moment for yourself. So I see a lot of people rushing in the morning. I like to have a very slow start to my morning so that I can do some of these things.
Well, I'll tell you how it started. I'll tell you how it started, Rocky. I launched my first book, and I have a morning practice that I do. I get up very early in the morning, around 3:30 or 4, and I have time that I spend with myself, and it's my creative time, I think, because nobody can get to me and interrupt me. But I was, after a few months of launching a book, which takes a lot out of you, I was having my morning coffee, and as I looked at it, I said to myself, boy, Tom, you could use a little grounding. And I looked at the coffee, and Morning Ground was born. I do something on Instagram and Facebook every morning for less than 2 minutes. And it says, before the day asks anything of you, take this moment for yourself. And each day has a word that I speak to, less than 2 minutes. And so it became popular. And I decided, well, why don't I take this material along with other things that I write and create an empowerment book? Sort of a daily empowerment book, but you can pick it up whenever you want it and read something that might inspire or motivate you. So that's how Morning Ground started.
And I think you just launched, right? So you're still kind of seeing how it's going?
It's been out 3 weeks, and I'm already made bestseller on Amazon, which is great. The first book behind me has won 6 book awards. I'm really proud of both of them, and both of them are really in service to others. This first one is a memoir that crosses over into self-help to inspire people to see the possibilities in life. And then this one is just, how can you take a moment in the morning or any time of day to slow down, reflect, and maybe have a little mini reset before you move forward?
And I think that's important for everybody. You spend a lot of your time now, though, coaching executives. Is that correct?
I do. I spend a lot of time working with CEOs, founders, nonprofit executives, their teams. I do retreats for people. I do a lot of that along with speaking. I continue with my writing. I have my own podcast. I'm also the CEO of a training academy, the Academy for Coaching Excellence. It's been around for 24 years. But I do spend a lot of time coaching high-level executives, yes.
What are some of the biggest problems that you see that they encounter?
It's not dissimilar from what we've talked about. People living in the past, not being willing to take risks or realize that they've accomplished things before. Often people come to me with a question about business and they leave with a different answer about themselves, which is always very interesting. But I love working with them because I've got some great examples of things like where someone has been a CEO and it's time for them to not be the CEO anymore, but they're not ready to stop working. And I love to engage with them about what they always wanted to do. Or people that one of my favorite stories was a CEO called me, had heard about me, and he said, I've got this major problem. And I said, well, tell me about it. And he said, I have this thing where I have my office door open. I invite people to come visit me. He called it the open door policy, which is a little bit dated. But I welcome people. I try and be their friend and I try and get them to come see me, and no one ever comes. And so I listened to his story and I said, you don't need me. I can tell you the answer. It's very simple. And he goes, no, tell me, tell me. I said, have you ever thought about getting up and going outside your office instead of waiting people to come to see you? Well, it was a revelation for him. And for us, we sound it, when I say it to you, it sounds so simple. And why wouldn't somebody see it? But so many people, when they're in the middle of something, don't see what's obvious to the rest of us. So I have something in my practice actually called the haystack method. You know how we say it's like finding a needle in the haystack? Well, I think you have your answers or your needle. I don't know your answers. My job is to hold the space so you can clear the hay to find your answer, that needle.
And I think great coaching is asking the right questions. Is that what you have found that help people to find their way?
I think sometimes, like I said earlier, we don't see things. If think about how many times you've seen even a friend or a family member, and you think to yourself, why can't they see the answer to that? Or why can't they see what's holding them back? Well, we're in the middle of something. We don't see all those things like you do when you're observing from the outside. And so sometimes having a coach or someone, I call it the energy of support. You see, there are many energies in life. There's the energy of time, physical vitality. There's the energy of money. There's the energy of the support of others. And we sometimes think we have to do it alone, and we forget there's people that can support us and help us. Now, I warn people to be mindful about the people who love us and our family and our friends, because something happens interesting. They love us and they tell us things that will make us feel better. And sometimes when we're trying to evolve and grow, it's not about feeling better.
No, I agree with you. If you give your mother the book to read, she's going to tell you how wonderful it is. But that's not necessarily the feedback that you need to publish a best-selling book. And so there is a difference in that. I've always said being a business owner or a leader is a self-development journey. You will only get as far as you are willing to look in the mirror and do the work to improve yourself or to see all
Yeah.
your blind spots and be able to work through them.
I talk to many people who would do it. I've done it. Most people do. We are getting closer and closer to reaching a goal or a dream, and we just think it's not going to come. And we either up on it or we step back. And often we're right on the precipice of something really big if we could just hang in there. And sometimes what we do is compare ourselves to others, and we perceive somebody else who did something that seemed easy when we really don't know how that evolved and what the story was and how it happened. Often the hard part is what happens right before things turn. I know this guy came to me one time and they had been in business 2 years trying to crack something, and they were about ready to close the business. And the week before they were going to close, they figured it out, and they're doing very, very well today. They came close to closing the business.
I believe there was a book along the themes of 3 feet from gold. I forget the exact title of the story, but a lot of people come very close and they don't realize how close they are either when they sometimes give up or don't make that last little bit of success.
Yep, they do. Or it's sort of like that in many things in life where you could be wanting to, you're interested in somebody and might want to date them or have a relationship, and we think they're not interested because they didn't respond the way we expected, when maybe they just have a different way of responding. Or your business, when you're working on something and you're waiting for something to come, well, maybe, just maybe, what you're waiting for isn't what it looks like. Maybe that's not what it's going to look like when it comes. And being fixed on how it looks or what time it's going to arrive is often not the way we manifest something.
I agree with that. I always say I didn't always get what I wanted, but I got what I needed. And so sometimes what we want isn't necessarily what we need, but you've got to be open to getting what life.
Or it's a stepping stone to something you were trying and that you wanted. I love this story. I had been in LA and I was doing a podcast with some Gen Zers, Zoomers, they like to be called. And I spent the day with them, and I got in the Uber and I was leaving, going to the airport. And the Uber driver said to me, "So what have you been doing today?" Which I rubbed my hands together. Okay, I love it when people ask me that. So I told him, I said, I was working with some people. We were talking about manifesting. And he said, "Oh, I gave up on the manifesting stuff." So I said, "Well, tell me about that. What happened?" And he said, "Well, I grew up a Catholic and I left that. And then I got into all this stuff. And then I got into manifesting. And he goes, but I didn't get what I wanted." And I said, "Well, what did you want that you didn't get?" And he said, "A new car." And I said, I looked around, and the Uber I'm sitting in is a brand new car. So I said, "Is this your car?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, it's a new car." And he goes, "Yes." I said, "Well, what happened to your old car?" He goes, "I rented out to other Uber drivers." So I said to him, well, why is this not what you wanted?" And he goes, "It's not the car I wanted." I said, "So wait a minute. You are manifesting getting a car. You've got this new car. Your other one's making you money. Did it ever cross your mind that maybe this is the stepping stone to the car you really wanted? Maybe this car too you'll rent out one day to make money like the other one." We had a little bit of more of a conversation, but my favorite part, I got out to leave to go to my gate. He said, "Sir," and I turned around and said, "Yes." He looked at me, goes, "I think I'm going to start this manifesting again."
Well, and here's what I say with manifesting. I think people don't realize that you have to actually take action towards what you're manifesting.
You need
It's
to
not
take
just thinking.
action. You need to take action. And then the other two keys are you have to be willing to give up how it looks when it comes and when it comes. We get so fixed on controlling the outcome and what we want. Or we also do something. I know somebody that they were in their business and they said they had planned on making 250,000 in revenue that year. And so I said, "Well, how much did you make?" And they said 255,000. I said, "Well, what am I missing? You wanted 250, you made 255." And they said, "Well, somebody gave me $50,000. It didn't come from me working for it." I said, "But you made your revenue, right?" So often we forget that we set the goal. And I like to tell people to add or something better. Don't box yourself into what you want, just to that fixed thing. Oh, maybe add just that little line at the end of it or something better. Who knows what might be coming your way?
And you don't. And that's kind of what I said. You don't always get what you want, you get what you need. And it's kind of along the same pattern. It gets you closer to where you want to go and the different things that are there. And you have to keep taking the steps
It's
forward.
also a great Rolling Stone song, Rocky.
Yeah, it is. It is. I forgot about that one. It's been a while. Is there anything you wanted to share today but didn't get a chance to?
Oh, I just love to share to people about the books, My Life in Business Suit, Hospital Gowns and High Heels, and Morning Ground, the new book. And I'd love to tell people how they can find me. I'm on all the socials. I'm on LinkedIn, my website, openingpathwayscollective.com. You can see my whole ecosystem of what Tom LeNoble is all about. And while my team goes crazy when I do this, my email address is resilience@tomlenoble.com. I'd love to hear from you.
time to learn the secrets of life.
What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
That success isn't always how we vision and define it. That success breaks down and baby steps can happen that lead to large leaps. Break it down. Don't just go for what you're looking for. Create the steps to get there.
Steps are not like a curve. They are jump ups, but it takes a while of the flat before you get to the next jump up. What's a lesson that cost you a lot but was worth every penny?
Oh, I love this question because some of my biggest mistakes in life have led to my biggest successes. I realized that I took a position one time and I took a big risk to take it. And the company went public and then the market crashed the next day. And what I realized later is most entrepreneurs that their startup fails, which is about 90% of them, we actually become much more marketable because we've been through that experience. So that's what I would share with you is for people to realize sometimes your failure just makes you really, really attractive to people because you've had the lesson of what does it mean not to be successful.
It makes you more resilient, and it
It does.
teaches you one thing you don't need to do the next time.
Well, I like to say resilience is your greatest currency. The stock market can crash, you can lose your job, your title can change, you can you can get sick, lots of things that happen, but nobody can take your resilience away from you. And it's like a muscle, kind of like your bicep or tricep. When you exercise resilience, it gets stronger and stronger and becomes more available to you.
So true. I know you like to work with a lot of young people. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Oh, I love this question too. I've got a great story for you that sometime I'll tell you, Rocky, but is that sometimes what we look at that someone has influenced us about what we can or cannot do is the first thing to look at to set aside and move past it. As we said earlier, people who love us like to protect us. People who love us like to make us think that what we're doing is really great and can keep us from reaching our goals and dreams.
And that is very, very true. If people would like to find you again, remind us where they can find the books.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the socials. My website, openingpathwayscollective.com. The books are on Amazon and all online retailers, and I'd love for you to check them out.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky. It was great to be with you and your viewers.
Tom's never accepted the diagnosis of his illnesses and what's going to be the outcome. He fought back and did it differently. Where in your life do you need to fight back against what you've been told, against something that's holding you back? Tom can do it. Why not you? By the way, do you know someone who might be going through something right now and needs to hear this? Share it with them. I would appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.